This is the definitive guide to paying your providers. Everything you need to know, the positives, the negatives, the upsides, the drawbacks of both models, and how you can onboard providers by setting realistic expectations of what they can expect from their pay. Now, the two main camps, the two main schools of thoughts within the contractor workspace like this would be the hourly pay and the flat rate pay. Now, while many people will immediately gravitate towards one over the other, I think it's very important that people consider the pros and cons of both and how it will affect not just their provider, not just their bottom line and their actual revenue and profit numbers, but also how it will affect their customers' experience and how it will affect your business's growth trajectory in the long term. Now, personally, when I started my first business, I built my entire subcontracting model around the hourly method. And there was one main reason that I always felt the hourly method was in some way superior to the flat rate method, and it is the cleaners feel like they can take their time and do a really high quality job. You cannot replace quality in a home service industry. You cannot have any substitute for a high quality service provided to your customer on a consistent basis. And the way that I felt we were most equipped to do that and deliver that regularly was, of course, through paying hourly. Now, the reason why was because if I was to send a cleaner into a space and say, you're going to make $100 while you're in this space, the natural human reaction would be to do that space as quickly as possible in a passable manner so that I could make that fixed amount of money in the shortest amount of time possible. Now, while this may be better for protecting your margins and some more things we're going to get into later in the video, I always felt like I wanted my cleaners to know that if more time was needed to get the job done, they would be paid more and were expected to make sure that that job was done perfectly every time. And that was the big difference in what I wanted for my business. Now, how has this affected my business since I've done this? I think in some ways our profit margins have shrunk. I think in some ways I have created more tasks, more things on my plate or my virtual assistant's plate. And I also think that my cleaners have in some ways actually slowed down just a little bit. I think I would be naive to say that no, they would work at this exact same rate if they were flat rate. I don't know that I can say that concretely, but I do know that the quality of service on average for our cleans is extremely high. And the only thing I can think to attribute this to is, of course, the actual pay and pay structure that our cleaners are receiving. They're getting paid very well on the hourly rate, and they are getting paid hourly, which incentivizes them to make sure no stone is left unturned and we have happier and happier customers. Now, as I've progressed through this journey, as I've progressed my business, I have now started to staff flat rate cleaners as well. Now, normally my flat rate cleaners are extremely experienced and are actually flat rate by their own choice. They feel that they're very efficient, they feel that their experience makes them fast, and they do not want to be paid hourly simply because they view that their time is more valuable than the hours I would be willing to pay them for, and therefore would prefer to go about it the flat rate pay structure style. Now let's talk about the flat rate and the advantages of the flat rate structure. Advantages are going to be fixed margins. You know what your service provider is going to make 10 times out of 10, right? Obviously, barring a very, very rare occasion where the home is not at all as described and large changes have to be made to the scope of work, but obviously your pricing will be changing for your customer as well. Now, I also think another advantage or another plus of the flat rate model is that cleaners who are extremely experienced normally like the flat rate model over the hourly model because, again, as I mentioned, they feel that their efficiency is almost punished by the hourly model and that it should not be the amount of time that they spend there, but rather what they're able to accomplish that they are paid for. I understand this camp completely. And as I said, I have two teams that operate with this model rather than the hourly model. And I don't think there's necessarily a correct versus an incorrect way to operate a business like this, but I do know that you will have direct and indirect side effects of the model that you choose. Now, my team or teams that operate on the flat rate method are more likely to have to do a revisit because something wasn't done perfectly, are more likely to leave without doing a walkthrough, little things like that, and in general have slightly less attention to detail. Now, this is not to say that the quality is bad. If they were bad, they would have been let go. But my best teams are my hourly teams when it comes to the thoroughness of their work and when it comes to the consistency of the quality that they put out because they know that they will be comped for that time. So now, as a business owner and as someone who is writing the invoices and collecting the payment, how do you structure this? And how does pricing being flat rate and pricing being hourly play into the hourly and flat rates for your service providers? And now, many people I think would initially say, well, if you're billing hourly, you have to pay hourly, and if you're billing flat rate, you have to pay hourly, or you have to pay flat rate. And I would disagree. I would argue that that's not correct. As a matter of fact, a lot of my flat rate customers are being serviced by teams that are paid hourly. And how do I make this work? How do I circumvent this potential discrepancy in the service and the time, and therefore a huge blow to the margins? Well, what I do is for all of my flat rate services, I give a caveat or a maximum amount of time that we are allowed to spend at that service for the pre-agreed upon price. So for the pre-agreed upon price, I will tell the customer, hey, for $300, you are going to receive up to 6 hours of service. It should take less than 6 hours, but it's going to protect you up to 6 hours of service. Now, if the home is different than described and it's in need of a deeper clean and it's dirtier than we anticipate, then we may need extra time, at which point we will add additional time by X breakdown of pricing. And that allows me to have the assurance that if my customer were to improperly describe the home, or if it was dirtier than we expected, when my team goes in there and needs an extra 2 hours of time beyond what was originally expected, that is not coming out of my margin. Rather, the customer has now agreed that they will pay to add that additional time as needed. And many people will hear this and probably think, oh, no way customers agree to this, no way that flies. I promise you it does, especially because the customer feels confident that you are actually going to be adding that time as a direct result of the space. You're not preemptively adding extra time, and they would rather see the lower price when you're closing them with the potential that it goes higher if their home needs it than be pitched the higher price on the expectation that it might need it, and then they end up overpaying, or they're going to just end up booking with someone else because your price will seem inflated. And this has very consistently worked for me without me needing to do a lot of deep explaining. The only time that there ever becomes further caveats with this that I think I should make aware for all of the viewers here is that when you are sending a team of 2 or 3 or 4, if you intend to bill or even make adjustments on the hourly style, make sure that your customer and you are on the same page with whether hours are billed per cleaner or for the service as a whole. For example, I bill extra time at $50 an hour, but if there's 3 cleaners there and they all need 1 extra hour, that's 3 extra hours. 1 hour extra times 3 cleaners. So the customer would be paying $150 extra, not just $50 because, well, they were only here for 1 extra hour. And that's something that I have to make sure I iterate and share very clearly with the customer when I am setting the booking up and doing the preemptive qualifying of everything that's going to be happening during the booking. Okay? So now we've talked about pay structure, we've compared the hourly rate to the flat rate, and we've talked about how it might be impacted by your different booking or billing style, being flat rate or hourly. I think the only way in which I would say 100% it has to be the same is if you're billing the customer hourly, you pretty much have to be paying your service provider hourly. Otherwise, I don't know how you could possibly match those up. But potentially, you might have a way that I just have not experienced or used before. Now, on the side of getting cleaners to see the value and agree to whatever that flat rate or that hourly rate looks like, and especially if they are to eventually find out what you are billing them out for, which all of my cleaners know what I bill them out for and know what percentage of that they make. How do you steer that conversation so that they're going to be receptive to it and not think that you're screwing them over or ripping them off? Well, the easy way that I do it is I will actually have a conversation with the cleaner, the service provider team directly and say, hey, this is what you're going to make of the job. This is what I'm going to make of the job. This is what that margin split looks like. And then my split goes to this line item, this line item, this line item, and I net X amount. Now, this way, I'm able to break down for a cleaner that us booking a $300 clean and them getting $150 and me getting $150 doesn't mean I made $150, and it definitely doesn't mean I made it doing nothing. Rather, I break out to them the fact that I have an ad cost, I have a fixed processing cost, I have all of the fixed costs of actually running and operating the business, from insurance to tech to whatever support staff, etc. And then that allows me to net a much, much lower percentage after all other expenses are covered. Now, obviously, that's not exactly true for every situation, particularly for recurring clients or whatnot, but the idea still rings true, and your cleaner is able to view you as much more fair once you've provided them context for the costs and the risks associated with your role within the business. That you don't only make their life simpler, but you provide the infrastructure that makes their job possible at all. And so the fact that you're splitting it with them 50-50, or the hourly rate that you're paying them, it should only come out to half of the job, has no bearing on whose value is greater and whether the cleaner is doing all the work or not, because that's not what business is, and that's not what this relationship that you are having with your service provider is about. It's about the opportunity cost, it's about the infrastructure, and it's about the financing and the time that you provide for them in the term of advertising and answering the phone and scheduling and follow up and all of that, that they do not have to redesignate towards their running of the business. Rather, they can focus on cleaning alone. So very frequently, I have cleaners that I sit down and speak with, and they at first hear 50% split, or I'm only going to make 25 or 28 or $30 an hour, and you're charging this for my time. That can't possibly be fair. That can't be right. I'm doing all the cleaning. And then upon explaining and providing clarity around how the infrastructure of the business works and why the value that you provide is so much more than just saying, here's an address, go clean it, then oftentimes they're able to understand that you really are on even terms with them. In fact, your weight, your load might be greater than theirs on the customer acquisition front, and that in itself warrants what you are taking of each deal and each job. So keep this in mind, regardless of whether or not you decide to go the hourly route, the flat rate route, or split test the two. The reality is there isn't a right or wrong way to pay your providers or run your business, but the expectations that you set with your providers and with your customers will change based on which model you use. And that goes for billing and for paying, because you cannot run the same show hourly as you can all flat rate. And if you want to be someone like me who intermixes the two, Your cleaners have to be prepared and understand the differences between the two and the nuances among the services that will be the really the deciding factor in what money they're going to make, and they understand that prior to going into the job. So there's no confusion, there's no surprise, and you can then say, hey, I'm expecting the same standard of cleaning and quality across both service types, and I know that the flat rate that I'm paying you is going to be fair and is going to be relative to the job total, the accurate, adequate split that you should be receiving. So if you are paying your service providers hourly and you want to pay them flat rate, if you are paying your service providers flat rate and you want to pay them hourly, the transition is not as difficult as you may think. The biggest thing is going to be realigning expectations with pay. And at the end of the day, the flat rate is still viewed in an hourly sense by the majority of service providers because all they can think of is I exchanged this much of my time and I made this much money. Whether or not it's actually paid out hourly doesn't matter. It's about how much money can I make a day, how much money can I make a week, and that all breaks out to how much money did I make and how many hours did I work. So don't be afraid of making a transition or testing a certain style, particularly if you are someone who's looking to get into the hourly rate for cleaning services and the pricing for your customers, but you feel held back because you only pay your providers on the flat rate style. You can make that transition and it's a lot less difficult than you think. And if you are someone who is in the hiring phase right now, think hard about what expectation you want to set for your cleaner and make sure that you get their input on it. Make sure that you hear from them what they would prefer and why and how their ideal pay structure would work, because that might also give you some guidance into the best way you can execute it with that service provider. Because if they are a true trained professional and they're like, hey, I really want to be paid flat rate, no matter how much you may like the hourly model, it may not work if you want that particular service provider. Now, if they're not that great and you're willing to part ways with them, you can always do that. But keep this in mind as you're doing your search, as you're doing your hiring, and everything else that's going to come alongside of setting your providers up for success and therefore setting your business up for success. So if you are paying your providers hourly, leave a comment. Let me know, what are you paying them hourly? Why did you decide hourly? On the flip side, if you're paying your providers a flat rate, let me know if you're paying them a percentage of the job, if that percentage is variable or fixed, which there's even more nuance to this conversation we could get further and further into. And let me know why you chose the fixed rate. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Again, leave a comment down below with what you are doing or what you would do, or any questions that you might have on anything that I may have missed in this video. Make sure you smash the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.